Yeah. So in this session, we will discuss about the concept of workflow. Okay. So what does it mean by the workflow and how to create an workflow? Okay. So workflow is nothing but if you want to automate your process, consider you want to perform some task, okay, or some series of steps you want to perform. So at that case, if you want to automate these series of steps to execute one after other, so then with the help of the workflows, we can do that. So series of steps is nothing but you can contain multiple tasks in it. Okay. So to automate these tasks to perform automatically, so then with the help of the workflows, we can automate your process. So workflow is nothing but a series of steps. So inside this series of steps, we can contain. So what these steps contain? So this step contain nothing but a task. So this, what does the task contain? So task is nothing but the entire functionality what we want to perform. So that entire functionality will be keeping that inside this task pack. We will be keeping inside this task. So task is nothing but a series of steps. Okay. So mainly we use these workflows on the content. So content is nothing but on the payers and on the assets. So if you want to something happen one step after other, okay, okay. Suppose if you want to execute a series of steps automatically, so then with the help of the workflows, we can execute a series of steps automatically. Okay, so then you can execute the series of steps automatically with the help of these workflows. So mainly, whenever you are creating a workflow, so workflow contains first we have to create a workflow model. Okay, so first we have to create this workflow model, and inside this workflow model, we can create n number of steps. So how many number of steps I want to create? So then n number of steps we can create inside this workflow model. Okay. So whenever you are going for a workflow model, so it would look like this. Okay. So whenever you are creating a workflow model, so we have mainly two steps. Okay. So workflow model is the main one. If you want to create an workflow, so inside this workflow model, we can create a number of steps. So each one is a step. So now I'm added five steps. So whenever you added five steps or whenever you have created a workflow model, so this workflow model by defaultly comes with two steps. So first is nothing but the start step, and second one you'll have the stop step. So these two steps are the mandatory steps whenever you want to create an workflow model, and in between these steps we can write any one of the functionalities, any one of the tasks which we are required with. So based on our requirement, we can create n number of steps, and what we can also create different number of different type of steps are also available, so to perform different actions. So we mainly have four types of steps. Okay, so we can create four types of steps. So first one is container step. So what does it mean by the container step? So if you want to trigger a workflow, okay, so inside your workflow, if you want to trigger another workflow, like calling a child workflow inside your main workflow, so at that case, with the help of the container step, we can do that. So container step gives us the permission to call a child workflow with inside an other workflow. With the help of the container step, we can do that. So second thing, so second thing, we have a participant step. So what does it mean by the participant step? So inside this workflow, if you want to have any human interaction, okay, if you want to get any human interaction inside the workflow, so then with the help of the participant step, we can do that. So you can assign it to a particular person, or you can assign it to a group of persons. Okay, so we have groups right internally. So if you want to assign to any group as well, so we can assign, or if I want to assign to any human, assign to any particular person, so then with the help of the participant step, we can do that. So with the help of the participant step, we can get an human interaction inside and workflow. So if you don't want this human interaction, so then you can use the normal step, which will fully automate your process. So in which cases we'll be using this participant step is, suppose if I want to, if I consider we are publishing the page, okay. So whenever we are publishing the page, when we are publishing the page, in which cases we'll publish. So once I have got the entire fully functional page, so that means according to the client requirements, once we have created those pages, so then I have to publish those pages, okay. So fully working pages will be publishing into the publish environment, human interaction. So to get that human interaction, so with the help of the participant step, I can assign this particular task to an group of users to an or a particular user we can specify. And third one, we are having decision step. So decision step is nothing but we want to perform any conditional statements. Okay. If I want to perform any conditional statements are nothing but two pathways. Now I have created a workflow. Suppose if I'm getting an answer yes. So at that time I want to execute one condition. Or if I'm getting no. So at that time I want to perform one more condition. Okay. So if you want to perform like this, so then with the help of the then with the help of the decision step we can do that. So simply like an if else statement. Okay. So whenever the condition is true, whenever it is if, I want to execute one type of statement. So when it is else, I want to execute one more type of statement. Second statement I want to execute. So if you want to get these things like if else statements, so then with the help of the decision step we can do that. So inside this decision step, we can what we can do is inside the decision step, we can write the and condition or conditions we can write with the help of the decision step. Okay. So decision step is nothing but we can get a two-way branching of your workflows. So when the conditions are one, so then one type of conditions will be executed. So that is the decision step. So and then fourth one we are having the process step. So so whenever we are having a lot of OSGA services internally, we are having a lot of out of the box steps or out of the box processes. So if you want to include any one of the process, so then with the help of the process step, we can do that. So process step, we have a lot of out of the box process step. Create a version, replicate a page, publish a page. Okay. So a lot of out of the box steps are available. So if you want to use these predefined out of the box steps, or if you want to write any custom functionality, so then with the help of the process step we can do that. So as I said, an example of replicating a pages. So while replicating a pages, what we need to have, so while replicating a pages, we need to create so while replicating a page, so this participant step should approve the page. So once after approving the page, then I have to publish the page. So replication is one action and it is one predefined OSGA service. So we have to call that action. Okay. So in order to call that action, which is nothing but replication, so at that case we have to use an process step. So with the help of the process step, you can write a task, we can include an OSGA service. If you want to write any custom action inside this process step as well, we can create a custom action inside this process step. So these are the different types of steps you can create inside an workflow. So container step, participant step, decision step, and then process step. So process step is made to include any functionality. So with the help of this process step only, we can perform multiple functionalities. So it can be it can be a new one, a user created one, or else we can also create as an we can also use the out of the box process steps are available, so we can also use the out of the box process steps. So once you have created this workflow, okay, so now what we need to do, so we need to execute this workflow. Okay, so to execute this workflow, we have two ways, we have three ways to execute the workflow. So first one is by using manually. By manually we can trigger, and then second one by using a launcher. Okay, so by using a launcher we can trigger, and third one is by using API or the code. With the help of this API or code, we can trigger the workflow model, whatever the workflow model we have created. So we can trigger this workflow model by manually or by using a launcher or by using an APR code. So APR code is nothing but the backend. With the help of the backend in any OSGS services, in a Sling model, servlet, scheduler, events. So any of things. So if you want to execute, so then with the help of the backend process, you can execute them. So launcher is nothing but automatically it will execute. Okay, so if you want to automate the execution of this workflow, consider we have created a version of a page. Okay, we have edited some component, we have edited some dialog, or we have added a component, deleted a component to the page, so automatically you want to execute this workflow model. So at that time, with the help of the launcher, we can automate your process and then it will execute automatically. So launcher is nothing but we can automate your process. So manually means we have one GUI, so graphical user interface. So with the help of this graphical user interface, we can trigger this workflow model manually. So every time, whenever you are creating this workflow model, so this is the heart of your workflow. Okay. So workflow model is the heart of your workflow, and this workflow model will store in two places. Okay. So this workflow model will store in two places. This workflow model will store in two places. So first one, it will whenever you are creating a workflow, it will store inside your config folder. Okay, so inside your config folder, your workflow model will be storing. And in the second place, inside the where folder as well, this workflow model will store. But this runtime data, okay, so runtime data of the workflow will store inside the where folder. Okay, if you want to get the runtime data of the workflow, so that inside the where folder it will be stored. So, but whenever you are creating this workflow model, the actual model will store inside the config folder and the runtime data of the workflow will store inside the where folder. Okay. So now we'll see how to create a workflow and then how we can uh, trigger the workflow using manually launcher or APRS code. Okay. So three ways we'll try to see. So in order to create a workflow model, so first we have to create an workflow model. Okay, so where can I create? So inside tools, we have an option of workflow. So tools, workflow, and inside this workflow, we have to create a model. So inside these tools, inside the workflow, we have a lot of folders. So models is one folder we are having, instance is one folder we are having, launcher, archive, and failures. So different folders I'm having. So what is the use of these folders? Okay, so first one, we are having the workflow model. So inside this, we have a lot of out of the box workflow models. And if I want to create a new workflow model as well, so we can create inside this workflow models. So inside the workflow models only, you can create an workflow. And after that, we are having and in the second place, we are having the instances. So all the running workflows, whichever the workflows that are currently active. So all the workflows will be inside these instances. And after that, launcher. So we have this right. So we can launch the workflow. We can start the workflow in three ways. So launcher. So with the help of this launcher, if you want to execute with the help of a launcher, so then inside the launcher folder, we have to create a new launcher. We have predefined launchers as well, so if you want to create a new launcher, so then inside the launchers folder, we have to create a launcher. And after that, we are having the archive. So archive is nothing but all the successful workflows, whatever the workflows that are successful and has completed their process. So those workflows will be available in the archive folder. So all the completed and successful workflows will be available on the archive folder. And after that, we are having a failures. So whenever a workflow is failed due to anything, so maybe allocation of some resource is not there. Okay, so in case of any failures, the failure workflow will be available in this failures folder. So if I go inside, so currently there are no workflows and then there are no failure workflows we are having. And all the successful workflows will be inside your archive folder. So once you have this, so in order to create a workflow model, so you have to come inside tools, workflow, and then you have here we can create a workflow model. So go inside these models and inside these models, click on create and then create a model. Okay, so you just create a model and give any title. So, okay, so I'm giving a title that is Marvel page version is one title I'm giving. Workflow models, and then this is the model which we have created. So Marvel hyphen page version is the model we have created, and it contains three steps. So start step one is which is one mandatory, and then stop step we are having mandatory, and then we are having some custom participant chooser step we are having. Okay, so if you want to choose any participant, so then with the help of the participant step we can do that. Okay, so right now whenever I'm going there and if I try to edit this one, okay, so you can see the settings here. So conf global settings workflow models is a place where our workflow model will store. Okay, so try to open inside the CRXT. You can place the path here. Okay, model has been created. Okay, but here inside this workflow model, if I go inside the JCR content flow, so this is the only step we are having, which is nothing but the step one we are having, which is a custom step. Apart from the start step and stop step, we are having the custom step. So whenever we are creating a model, so inside this conf folder, the models will be stored. But here the model only will be stored. If I want to have any runtime data, okay, whenever we are executing the workflow, so but the workflow will not be executed from the conf folder. The workflow will be executed from the where folder where the runtime data of the workflow will be stored. So if I go inside where, and then where we'll have a folder called workflow. And then inside this workflow, models we are having. And inside the models, so check for your model. Um, Okay, so Marvel page version is a model which we have created, right? So inside this particular, from this where folder, the runtime data of the workflow will be taken. So whenever you are executing, so either to manually or launcher or using API or code. So every time when you are when you are executing the workflow, so the workflow will be executed from this where folder. The runtime data of the workflow will be stored inside this where folder. And then inside the nodes, if I go here, so we have node 0, which is nothing but the start step, and node 1, participant chooser, and then second node we are having the end step we are having. So these are the three nodes which you can see inside this workflow model. Suppose if I go there and if I try to delete this step, so step 1 I am deleting. Okay, so if I delete this step 1 and if I go there inside the crxd and if I try to refresh these nodes, okay, when I'm trying to go inside this one, still I'm having three nodes. Okay, so node 0 I'm having, node 1 dynamic participant step I'm having. So all the steps I'm having inside this workflow, but still inside the model I have deleted one step. Okay, so when you make any changes inside this workflow model, so these changes get reflected inside your conf folder. Okay, so these changes will get reflected in your conf folder, and if they are reflected in the conf folder, but whenever you are starting the workflow, the runtime data will be coming from this where folder. Okay, so at that time, these steps would be available in the runtime data of the workflow. Okay, so every time whenever you are making these changes to the workflow model, so if you want to get these changes available to the runtime data as well, so here we have an option of sync. Okay, so once you click on this sync, now it will be turning into the green state which is synced. So once it is synced, so then whatever the data that is there inside your conf folder and the where folder, the data will be matched. Now if I refresh, only two nodes are available. So node 0 is nothing but node 0 is the start and node 1 is the stop, because we have synced the changes. Once we sync the changes, so those changes would be available inside your where folder. That is the runtime data of your workflow. Okay, so now we'll try to add some custom step. We'll try to add. Okay, so we are having the content tree here, so you can just okay, so create version is one out of the box step which is already available. Okay, so which will create the version of the page. So now we have created a workflow. So start flow manually. And in the second part, we are having launcher. And then third one is by using the API or code we are having. So first we'll see manually how we can start the workflow. So here we have an option of page information. Okay, so go inside this page information, and then here we have an option of start workflow. So just click on this start workflow, and we have to pass this thing. So which is nothing but the payload. Okay, so payload we have to pass. So every time whenever you are going for a workflow, so whenever you are starting the workflow, payload is nothing but the path you have to specify. So where I want to execute this workflow, on which pages or on which content I want to execute this workflow. So that is, if you want to specify that, payload is one thing we have to specify. So payload is mandatory every time you are starting a workflow. So payload is one mandatory thing. So which is nothing but the path where I want to execute this workflow. So just select the payload, and then I'll apply for the pages. So content, and then Marvel sites, US and EN. So for the EN page I want to execute, and then simply I can click on OK. And okay, so once I have run the workflow, so workflow form has been submitted successfully. So if you want to check whether a page version has been created or not, so go to the sites console. Okay, so inside the sites console, select the EN page, and then here we have an option of content only. So inside this content only, go to timeline, and inside the timeline, inside the show all version, so go to version. So if you observe here, for this specified any title, right, in the start, we haven't specified any title, so that's why the title is not there. A new version of the page is created 4 seconds ago. A few seconds ago, a new version of page has been created. So why, how it has been created? So it has been created with the help of the payload we have to pass, which is one mandatory thing in order to start the workflow. So this is the second console we are having where we can start the workflow. Okay. And after that, so second one we are having the launcher. So how we can how we can execute the workflow with the help of a launcher. So launcher is an automator to your process. Okay, so there is no manual interaction. So whenever we are creating or editing the content inside the page, so automatically a version of the page will be created with the help of the launcher. We can do that. So just go to the tools console, and in help of the launcher we can do that. So just go to the tools console, and inside the tools console we'll have the launcher. So tools, workflow, and then we have the launchers. So go inside the launchers. We have a lot of predefined launchers, and if you want to create one launcher, so then we have to click on create. So click on create and add a launcher. Okay, so event type. Okay, so event type is nothing but I'll select as a modified. So whenever a content of the page has been modified, so that means either removed, created, or deleted. Okay, page has been modified. So that means either removed, created, or deleted. Okay, so if you want, if whenever the content of the page has been modified, so then I want to execute this workflow. Okay. So second thing is node type. So what is the node type I want to execute? So I want to execute this for pages. Okay. What is the node type of the pages? CQ colon page is the node type of the page. So then here we have to select the node type. So node type is nothing but CQ colon page. And third one is path. Okay. So path is one mandatory thing. So path is nothing but the payload. So where I want to execute the workflow. So that thing we can specify with the help of path. So path is nothing but the payload we have to pass every time. It is one mandatory thing. So without the payload, you can't execute an workflow. So select the payload. So content Marvel sites US and EN. So inside for this EN page, I want to execute. So then select this EN. Okay, so this is nothing but the payload. And run mode is nothing but in which run mode I want to execute. So in the other run mode I want to execute. And if you want to execute on both author and publish, then you can select both author and publish. But by defaultly in the publish instance, we don't make any changes inside the environment. Okay, so that's why I'm selecting for the author only. So for the both as well we can select, and for only publish environment as well we can select. So once you have created, so what is the workflow model? Okay, so this thing we have to pass. So which version, what is the model of the workflow we have created? So Marvel page creation is the workflow model we have created, right? So just from this drop down, select your workflow model. So Marvel page version is the model which we have created. So select this workflow model you have created. So if you want to write any description, we can write the description. So immediately, if you want to execute your workflow, okay. So now we have given all the required things. So whenever the node is modified, okay. So which type of node it is? CQ colon page and where it is modified. So under Marvel USCN is the node I have modified, and then in the author instance I have given. Okay, but if you want this workflow to be executed, okay, if you want to get this workflow executed, so at that time here we have to select the activate. Okay, so whenever the workflow is in the activate state only, then the workflow will be executed. So with the help of the launcher, what we can do is, okay, if I want to execute, so then we have to activate it. Suppose if I don't want this workflow anymore, maybe in the future I want to get, so instead of deleting the workflow, so simply you can deactivate it. So once you have deactivated, so at that time the workflow will not be executed when you are creating a version. Suppose if you want the workflow, then you can simply come to this launcher and then you can activate the workflow. Okay, then you can activate the workflow with the help of this activate and deactivate. So to execute this one, we have to select this option. That means we have to activate the launcher. Okay, so once you are done, so just click on create. So once you click on create, so here the workflow model would be available. So inside this launcher, somewhere the launcher will be available. Search for note time. Note modified CQ column page. Okay, so this is the workflow launcher we have created. So this is the path, and then node type is modified, and the node or event type is modified, and node type is CQ column page, this is the workflow model we have created, and then it is enabled. Okay, in the other instance, this workflow launcher has been enabled. So go to the sites console and try to check one more version will be created. So en, and then okay, Marvel page 6 minutes ago. We'll try to add or delete any content inside this one. Okay, so now we have added some content. Okay, so new version has been created few seconds ago. 1.2 version has been created. If you want to check only the versions, you can select show all and select versions. Okay, new version has been selected because when we are selecting, so what happens? So we have the multiple options. So preview, compare to the current version, revert to the version. So if you want to refer to the previous versions as well, we can refer. Okay, so we can revert, and then compare means we can compare to the current version which we are having. Okay, and then preview also we can do. So what is the content inside this preview? So that is the page it is loading. Okay, and then we have an error inside that article details component. So with the help of the launcher, automatically we can trigger. Suppose if I try to make any and one more changes, and if I add, suppose if you observe here in the article details component, whenever I'm including, that thing has been removed. Okay, right? We have an error while including the component. So simply if you can go there and then we can revert the changes to the previous version. Okay, so with the help of the versions, we can do that. Okay, so that is the second way by using the launchers. This is how we can trigger the workflow. And third one is by using the API or the code. So in any of the backend modules, okay, so in any one of the backend modules which we have discussed, we can trigger this workflow. So either in the Sling model, Sling model we can trigger, and then servlets we can trigger, and then we can trigger inside the OACI services. Services we can trigger, or OSGI components we can trigger, and then we can also uh, do that inside the event handlers, and then we can also perform this inside the scheduler. We can perform that inside the scheduler. So with the any of the backend module, whatever the backend modules we are having in any of the backend module, we can trigger this workflow model. Okay. So now in this example, we'll see how to trigger the workflow model using an servlet. So every time when you are triggering the workflow model, so two things we have to pass. Okay. So manually, so launcher and API code look very similar. Okay. But here you are using some predefined classes, and with the help of the predefined classes we can do. So inside the launcher what we have done, so inside the launcher every time when we are triggering, so we have given two things. Mainly we have given two things. So first one we have given the model, workflow model we have given, and second one we are giving the path. So these are the two main things whenever you are selecting a launcher. So if you are going for the API code as well, so we have to perform these two things. Okay. So we have to select the API, we have to select the workflow model, and second one we have to select the workflow data. Okay. So workflow data is nothing but the payload of your workflow. Payload is nothing but the path where you want to execute this workflow. So right now, in order to get the workflow model, so we have four steps. Okay. In order to start the workflow model, we have four steps. So first one, okay, so first we have to get the workflow session. Okay, so once I have got the workflow section, so second thing we have to get is workflow model. Okay, second thing we have to get the workflow model, and third thing we have to get the workflow data. Okay, so workflow data is nothing but the path or the payload. Okay, so path or payload is nothing is called as a workflow data, and then fourth we can start the workflow. Okay, so if you want to start the workflow, so if you want to trigger the workflow manually by using, so if you want to trigger the workflow by API or code, So at that time, we have to follow these four steps. So first I have to get the workflow session, and second we have to go for a then we have to get the workflow model, and third one we have to get the workflow data, and then we can start the workflow. Okay. So now in order to get this one, try to create one servlet. Once it gets activated, we will start. Okay. So go inside a servlet and try to create one servlet. Okay, so page version workflow is one class I have created. Okay, so now once we have created the workflow, in order to convert, have to do first we have to either we have to extend safe method servlet or sling all method servlet we want to execute, right? So sling safe method servlet, I want to get only the to get method, so that's why I'm going for the sling safe method servlet. So once you have got that, what we have to do, so this servlet is an OSGS service. Okay, we have to convert that into an OSGS service. We have to use this at the rate component animation. So at the rate component, and then service we have to pass. So in order to get the life cycle of a servlet, which is available on the servlet interface, we have to pass servlet dot class. So which is nothing but Java X should be the input of the servlet. So servlet dot class. So immediately after deployment, I want to execute this one. So at the time, immediate equals to true is the property we have to pass. So try to input at thread component and then service. Okay. So and then service. Okay. So service is equals to servlet dot class and immediate equals to true. Okay. So now we have created an, so now we have converted your normal servlet into an OSES service. Okay, so in order to execute the servlet, what we need to have an URL, right? So either we can create, first we need to bound this servlet to an URL. So how to bound the servlet? We have two ways, either resource based servlet or a path based servlet. So right now, now we don't want to get this content into any components or any base. That means which is not an resource. Okay, so at that time we'll go for an path based servlet. So I'll go with the 1.4 version. So to define that, so at the rate sling servlet paths, and then it accepts one parameter which is nothing but a value is the parameter we have to pass, and inside this value you can register your workflow. So pin marble workflow page creation page version. Okay, so bin should be already registered, and then the whatever the path you are specifying, so this is an custom path, we can do that. Okay, so once I have got this workflow value, or once I have created this one, so now what we have to get is, so we have to get the do get method. So override the do get method, and once you have overridden the do get method, we have to call this, we have to perform all these steps. So first we have to get the workflow session. Okay, so workflow session is one parameter. So where I can get that from a resource resolver. Okay, so in order to get a resource resolver, how we can get the resource resolver inside a servlet? With the help of the request object, we can get that. So request dot get resource resolver. Okay, so request dot get resource resolver and try to create an object for it. Okay, so resource resolver is the object. We have so workflow session. Okay, so com dot a dot, so this should be the URL. Okay, so you turn on JSON one. Okay, so once you have got this, so once you have got this workflow session, so just try to import this workflow session. So com dot day dot cq dot workflow should be the input. Okay, so workflow session dot class, and then assign it will return an object of workflow data. It will return an object of workflow session only. Okay, so workflow session is the object it has written. So from this workflow session, what we have to get? So we have to get the workflow model. Okay, so after the workflow, we have to get the workflow model. Okay, so in order to get the workflow model from the workflow session, so here we have one method. Okay, so workflow session dot get workflow model. Get model is the method we are having. Okay, so inside this get model, what we have to pass is we have to pass the data of the workflow. Okay, so which is nothing